Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and today I just have the great pleasure of introducing the great Arvind Manocha, who runs the Wolf Trap Foundation. Again, I think this is our third interview, Arvind.
I think that might be right.
So we have a pretty substantial history together. I worked with you and for you when you were over at the LA Phil, working for the marvelous Deborah Borda. And we've seen this field evolve. We've gone through COVID. We've seen the audiences come and go. How are you feeling about the state of the performance art nowadays in this environment?
Well, I feel very positively about it, and I feel that way for a couple of reasons. I think COVID just underscored what all of us who are professionals in this field and people who care about the arts, I think, have always said, which is that, live music, live performing arts, the experience of seeing art on a stage, being performed on a stage in the company of hundreds or thousands of your fellow, members of society, is really important, and it's really ingrained in us, and it is almost hardwired into us. And when we missed it during COVID, it made that very clear. And I think even those who might be skeptical and say, oh, you arts people, you always talk about the power of the arts and, the resilience of the arts and how important it is, but that's kind of your shtick. And then they didn't have it for a year or a year and a half, and they all realized, I really missed that. So it underscored something that we, I think, have been beating the drum for our whole career. Post-COVID, I found that people rushed back. That aching, that longing was so clear and palpable. And I can certainly say from our perspective here out in Northern Virginia, our audiences in the last 4 years have just been spectacular, very, very strong. We dreamed during COVID of being able to reopen and getting back to our pre-pandemic levels. We did that in the first year and surpassed that by far in the second year. And so we feel like we're in a different place. And I do appreciate, you try to find the positives out of a very negative period of time. If one of the positives, at least for some period of time, is that members of society at large have doubled down on the importance of this communal experience of going to concerts, then, I say that's one of the most positive things to have come out of that era.
I'm also getting the sense that the audiences are becoming more appreciative of the interactive element of sort of being together. We're so intermediated by technology. I mean, you and I are being intermediated by technology right now, but social media, our cell phones, all these different platforms that we're encouraged to use. I just get a sense that there's a little bit of a difference in taste, and the taste is for in-person, connected communication, interacting with artists. Not only their art, but also with artists. Do you feel that way?
I do. And, again, it may be that I'm, so long in this world and this on a professional level that it's just part of the way I approach the day. But I do believe what you're saying is true. And I think that, look, I'd say pre-COVID, even though there's been such a change in the way technology can deliver all sorts of different experiences over the last 30 years. And that's, there's nothing profound about that. Technology changes. TV happened at some point. That was a big change. Then the internet, all of that. But even before COVID, with all of the, ease in which you can consume music and watch, video clips of great performances of all sorts of different art forms from all over the world, you'd think, oh, well, maybe people will never have to leave the house again. But of course they did. Even then people did. The live music business didn't suffer pre-COVID because of technology. Post-COVID, I think, in fact, what's happened is there are so many other places or areas of our day-to-day lives where screens and technology have taken such a larger share. So, for example, we're doing this interview over Zoom, as you mentioned. So many people are, even if they're back in the office for 2, 3, maybe even 5 days a week, they are still doing a lot of work over Zoom, right? We are doing a lot, the business travel is down. The need to go and see clients in person is maybe diminished. You can do some portion of that over Zoom. Committee meetings, all sorts of things are happening on Zoom that never used to happen pre-COVID, which means the amount of time in a day that you find yourself staring at a screen, not just for pleasure or news like your phone, but also for work, has gone up exponentially. I think that does create some fatigue, and it reminds people, I need to get out and do stuff. I need to be with people, to your point. I need to have less of a technical intermediary. And they come to concerts, that's what we're talking about. I'm sure there's other things, but we come to concerts and it's that visceral sense of being with other people. Not that I haven't felt a sense of communing when I can say, okay, I'm 1,000 people on this webcam. I'm watching this artist from some club.
But it's not the same.
It's not the same as being with 1,000 people in the room, in the moment, feeding off the energy, listening to the applause. Having a moment, at the intermission to talk about what you just saw. That's a very, like I said earlier, I do believe that's not exactly in our DNA, but it's been such a part of the human experience for so many thousands of years that it's becoming part of how we're wired.
I'm detecting also a difference in programming in organizations like Wolf Trap. And now Wolf Trap is completely unique. Right? How many national parks do we have for the performing arts?
We have one. We have one national park for the performing arts.
One.
Yes.
One. It is completely unique. And one of the things that you had said previously, and I'll go back to our 2018 interview. We are owned by our community by definition, and we should have programs that reflect society. That is the goal. That is never achieved fully and always one that we are striving for. It changes and it evolves, right?
Yes.
So you're basically seeing yourself as serving everyone.
Yes.
Everyone.
Yes.
So you're listening to your audiences and you're shaping programs around that audience and their tastes and how they absorb the art, right?
Absolutely. And everything I said to you in 2018, I say a version of that frequently. I talked about that this week when I was speaking to a group of people about what we do here at Wolf Trap and why is there a national park for the arts and all of that kind of thing. In a way, it makes our life fairly straightforward conceptually, because I think when I'm sitting down with our programming team and thinking about, the seasons, whether it be at the Feline Center, which is the national park, but even in our indoor theater, which is our year-round recital hall, the National Park for the Arts belongs to all Americans equally. Doesn't belong to the government, doesn't belong to our foundation. It literally is owned by the people. So how can we not seek to try to program for all the people? It doesn't mean that there's not, areas of focus. In some years, there may be more of an area of focus in one genre or the other. It doesn't mean that, some things aren't more prevalent on the calendar because they're more popular in the region. It gives us a reason not to exclude anything. We don't feel that there's any reason not to pursue any kind of art form or musical genre. As I said then, I say now, that's a never-ending quest. I don't think we're perfect. I don't think any organizations can ever claim to have solved that nut totally. If you're trying to be expansive and reflective of society, that's probably impossible in any one season, but it's certainly a very nice thing to strive for.
Well, it's striving for a more perfect union, right?
Yeah.
You never get to the perfect union. You can only just make it better. And so let's say you go through one season and you've done, you say, it's absolutely going to happen, right? You're going to have a certain focus. And then the next season, do you basically take stock of your previous seasons and say, where have we not focused?
Sure. Sure.
Who have we not served for a while?
Absolutely. And, whether it's for a while or whether it's, we could go further in a certain direction. We saw how things landed in a season and we think, we could do more of that, or we think maybe we offer too much of one particular genre and we want to pull back a little bit and build it over time and be a little bit more studied about it. It's not a science, as you well know, and I think probably most people who are in the arts know. It's not, sometimes you get questions from outsiders or very well-meaning folks who say, well, do you have an algorithm on how you, because they hear that about the way Spotify works or about how YouTube works. And, is there a checklist or is there a formula? Is there something mathematical that you're doing? I think that may be true when you're talking about it being computer generated. And I'm not trying to discount the world of AI and algorithmic curation. But when it comes to these organizations where you have human beings on the programming side and a team of people who are at the venue on the ground, kind of listening to the way concerts are landing with audiences and hearing from people in the moment, because we're all together, going back to that earlier comment, your patrons are very vocal, whether it's directly to you or indirectly by, being part of their experience. There's some feel to it. Curation is, it's not in my mind purely scientific.
Art.
There's heart to it, there's feel to it, there's a sense to it, there's maybe a feeling of like, the audience is into this, I think we can take them in a slightly different route, or there's another artist that they might not be aware of, but we're going to put them on as an opener, and that's going to open up a new path for us. It's a combination of taking stock, and taking stock can be quantitative to a degree. There's certainly quantitative metrics we all look at. There's qualitative, but then it's beyond taking stock and also having some confidence in each of the programmers' innate sense of music and curation. And I'm very fortunate to work with spectacular, fabulous programmers. Our programming team, it's exactly what you would hope for in an arts organization, which are people who live and breathe music, who have that emotional and visceral connection, but also have a sense of that you're curating for an audience, which, there's a bit of business sense in that as well. And I think if you can marry those things together, you can find yourself with seasons that you are very, very proud of, and which also feel very responsive to the audience that you have. And I think that's where you make connection and you have very strong sales. That's why I feel like our people, we're lucky here that the energy, the circle of energy between us and the audience and the artist seems to be really aligned at the moment. We're in an era where everything seems to be in alignment. And I think that's part of what fuels that sense that people want to be here.
So because it's you, I'm going to ask you a little bit of a surprise question, but go with me for a second. So there is something that happens in people where there is no evidence that they will like a new piece of music or a new theatrical, but there's no evidence. It doesn't exist, right? It's a new creation. And somebody who really is steeped just has a gut sense.
Mm-hmm.
And they put it on stage and it could be a failure, could be a flop, or could be the most massive hit you can imagine. But there's no evidence. Talk about any kind of experience that you can pull out of your own rich history, perhaps at Woke, perhaps before, where you've seen that kind of choice being made, that really it's about the experts that you've hired around you being out there functioning as our scouts for what we would love. But there's no evidence yet that we would love it, right? We haven't heard it yet.
I think that happens a lot, actually. I mean, I think that happens in so many in so many different kinds of ways. I'm thinking off the top of my head, there's obviously the world in presenting, which we do a lot of, and then there's the world of producing concerts and content, of which we do as well. I think about... And
your artist in residence programs, right?
Our artist in residence program, or, if I think about our opera program, where we are producing 3 new operas a year, and, with almost no exception, they are truly unique, cut from whole cloth, new productions. And you're thinking about, a vision of a director or even a vision of the costumer or the scenic designer. And these are all unknowns. I mean, people who are in that world are dealing with this every day, right? They're dealing with, I'm going to create something and I'm going to put it on stage. I'm going to have an interpretation of this great work through my artistic lens. It's a new production. It is by definition not road tested. I don't have 20 years of history of it coming back into rep every 2 years because it's a big crowd pleaser. These are new. We do a lot of new productions here. That kind of stress, in the beginning, when you talk to folks who are new to that kind of world, it's almost overwhelming because you think, well, God, we worked on this for 6 weeks or however long it was. And
you've got to get butts in the seats, and you've got a house to fill, and you've got a business to run, but you're still taking risks. That's the point, right?
And in that world, I mean, if you think about it from an operatic standpoint, if it's not also a new opera, but more often than not, it's an opera people are familiar with, but a new production. So you're competing with a sense of expectation because the audience is there because they know the piece, they know their favorite arias, they've seen that opera 12 times. They just haven't seen your new version of it. So you're not only showing them something new, you have to, in some ways, compete with their memory of what they liked about a previous production.
You're positioning everybody as a critic, right?
Absolutely.
And then you're saying, criticize me or embrace. You're basically opening yourself up to the instantaneous response of that audience.
But when it comes to on the presenting side, I mean, certainly we, if I think about the Feline Center at the National Park, it's a 7,000 capacity amphitheater. Clearly we are dealing with headline acts of a certain stature who are selling a lot of tickets, who are known, right? These are known entities, right? That is not a forum of that size where you're going to take somebody who's never performed, to a large audience before and throw them out there. That would not seem responsible, I would think, to the artist. But in an environment like that, there are opening acts, there are multi-act bills where there are a few folks leading up to the main event. That's where, my team is spectacular at identifying new young talent at festivals, at showcases, at small clubs, at places around the country which might be a little bit further afield, and thinking about what is the right artistic pairing with this much larger, or I should say much more well-known act coming through, and kind of collaborating with that act to say, let's put this bill together. And often big superstar acts do that with their own tours, thinking about younger talent they want to nurture or showcase as lead-ins to themselves. That is a wonderful way for an audience to get exposed to something very new in a way that's actually, quite frankly, a little bit safer for the new artist and for us, right? Because the burden of selling enough tickets in a 7,000 seat hall isn't on the shoulder of this perhaps younger talent on their way to creating their fully realized self. And it also means less pressure for us on a business sense, right? Because it's not the burden.
I love what you just did. And this is one of the reasons why I've admired you for so long. You just made a profound point, and you made it as if it wasn't profound. Right? What you just did is you talked about the process of risk management, right, for an institution while you're advancing an art form and innovation, giving the up-and-comer next generation the opportunity. And what you've basically described is you and maybe your headline act collaborating on what comes before that headline act presents, right? And in that process, giving space on the stage and the appropriate associations to nurture the next headline act. Because if we don't nurture those people when they're coming up, at a certain point, we will not have the next generation of headliners.
Oh, absolutely. But I think, that ecosystem, we bandy a word like ecosystem around a lot in business talk, but it's very evocative and appropriate, because if you think about a biological ecosystem having many different components to it, all of which have to work together in order for the entire system to be healthy, right, at all levels of that ecosystem. It's a form of symbiosis all the way around. The arts ecosystem is not unlike that, much like I'm sure many other industries. It's in everybody's best interest. It's nothing there's nothing rocket science about a venue or a person in a position like mine at a venue saying, oh, we need to get fresh young talent on the stage in a safe environment in order for them to succeed and us to have new voices and colors to hear. But the industry needs that, right? The agents need that. The managers need that. The headliners need that. The venue managers at all different sizes need that. I mean, I'm very lucky in this position to have a very large outdoor amphitheater and a very intimate indoor recital hall. And in that indoor recital hall of 384 seats, that dynamic is very different. The kinds of artists you're booking are different. The whole atmosphere is obviously very different. The experience for the audiences are different. But that's its own little ecosystem as well, because that's a world of artists out there for whom a 400 seat hall is the world in which they work, right? That is the world in which their art form or their artistry is most suited. But even there, you need folks who were playing 20-seat coffee shops getting to a point where perhaps, they're going to carry the burden of doing essentially a club tour of 400 seats. And those people sometimes are also on the bill with a big headline superstar over at the 7,000 seat summer stage. It all feeds each other. And I hope our industry, and I believe this, I'm very optimistic about the music business broadly. We can all be very cynical about the business end of music, but there is, I think, always a sense of responsibility towards the next generation, providing opportunity, providing stages, providing showcases, nurturing talent, because I think we all know if we don't do that, it's not good business sense, right? 20 years from now, we're going to be running out of a pipeline of great artists. So I'm glad to hear that lands well with you, and I hope it does with anyone listening, because to me, it feels like that isn't even an option or something that we can choose to consider or not. I feel like it has to be part of what we do. Otherwise, why are we doing it?
Since we work together on recruiting assignments, one of the things that was really easy to do with you is you're a very systematic thinker and a systematic analyst. So, and we're all about evidence. So we were able to look at what you wanted to achieve and then show how somebody might be able to bring those attributes to the table. But I'm wondering about the role of stories, because we also listen to stories when we're recruiting a curator or even somebody who runs security for an institution. We're not only looking at the evidence and the facts and so on. We like to listen to people's stories about how they dealt with certain things, how they spend their lives, how they spend their free time, and so on. Sometimes the story is the thing that gives us more information than just the facts. Are you finding that when you're hiring people, what are you looking for when you're building your team, you're cultivating your team, you want to achieve all these different outcomes that are intention, right? Butts in the seats, new art, cultivating artists, educational experiences. You've got a lot of goals in tension. How do you interview people who are coming in and applying for a job that you might have?
Well, I mean, that's such a big and interesting question, because there's sometimes the nature of each of those jobs has its own characteristics. And, I feel like there may be slightly different things you're looking for, depending on what part of your team you're trying to fill. And I don't even mean just the job, the specifics of the job, the nuts and bolts of it. But if you're trying to populate a team, you're also thinking about the team dynamic and what might be missing, or what you might want to have more or less of, or
communication styles, human relationship attributes, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of different aspects to it. I think that's why in most, robust hiring processes, it's a lot of different people talking to the candidate, right? And having different ways to interact, some of it more technical, some of it more cultural, some of it more just, like you say about the fit and feel. Right. I think for me, I may be fortunate that by the time I'm more deeply involved in the hiring, there's been a lot of people who have pre-interviewed and vetted, right? So I'm not often the first person the candidate is speaking to. I may not always be exactly the last person, but I'm generally last or close to the end. I think about, at that point, the technical is probably well vetted. I don't need to provide, I don't need to have a technical interview. I might be interested in certain technical things and responses to technical questions, but the vetting of that aspect of the candidate has been happening for many, many weeks prior to them getting to me. I think about it more, how does a candidate think? Not so much what, but how. How is that communication taking place? Are we able to create conversation? I was having a conversation the other day about interviewing, and I said, it's very telling to me if I have X amount of time blocked out with a candidate and we really have a perfectly wonderful conversation. There's no mistakes made on either side. I did a good job, they did a good job, but we find ourselves with 10 minutes left over. And I think, I don't budget so much time that we should have time left over. Like that to me is very telling. When I get to the end, and I think we're in the middle of conversation or in the middle of a sentence, and I see that I'm over time by 3 minutes, and that's a really good sign for me. Something is happening in that time period that we are moving beyond what's on the resume or what's in the cover letter or what are in the notes that, the search firm or my colleagues have given me to prepare. We're past all of that, and now we're having real conversation. That, for me, is always a sign of, maybe this is somebody I'd like to have on my team because we're having a good talk.
Boy, I love that point, because what you're basically also pointing out is that building teams is also such a human activity. You can't just do it as working with a human front end to AI systems, right? You have to actually have to get the measure of the person who is going to inhabit that, whether that person is going to fit in to your context.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the last gating issue,
Mm-hmm.
right? A technical expert who won't fit into your context is no good to you.
Mm-hmm.
But as we're coming to the end of our time, let's do a pitch for Wolf Trap.
Okay.
I'm coming to Washington. I really am coming to Washington. I come very often because my mother lives in Baltimore, and I come over to visit. Mm-hmm. So what should I be buying tickets to over the next 3 months at Wolf Trap?
Well, our big concert focus is in the summer. We open our summer concert series at the end of May. We typically open right around Memorial Day. That's our tradition, and we go through September. And I really do feel very, very sincerely that we present the widest spectrum of music at a major summer concert.
Oh my goodness!
I mean, it really
opera, classical, popular. You've got
of course, there's lots of venues that do a lot of things, and many of whom are very, very broad. And I've worked at some of those, all of that. But so whether you're talking about rock or rap or old school hip hop or indie rock or even great Indian pop stars from South Asia. We also go further into fully staged grand opera or fully staged ballet. It really is an opportunity to think about what do you, or maybe you and your family, really, really enjoy. And you look at our calendar, you're bound to see an artist that is going to speak to that interest. What I'm looking forward to this summer, and I think we're opening the season with Sting. We have an expanded residency with our longest standing partners, the National Symphony Orchestra, including a weekend of concerts with their music director, Maestro Noceda. We have a whole series of Wolf Trap opera events here at the Barns and over at the park all summer long. I think about St. Vincent with the orchestra. I think about Shreya Ghosal, the Indian superstar, coming back to Wolf Trap at the end of the year. I think about Bob Dylan touring with Lucinda Williams. There's just so many different things that are coming down the path for us that I think it's going to be a great summer. So I hope everybody comes out and spends a little time with us.
And who can't love a Sound of Music sing-along?
Well, there's something for everyone, like I said.
You are amazing. Thank you so much for sharing the work of Wolf Trap, the Wolf Trap Foundation, and the wonderful, wonderful people who build this organization on a day-to-day basis. Please thank your entire staff, your board, your donors, your ticket holders, your audiences, your volunteers, the ticket takers, the people who show us to our seats. It's just wonderful to have you on. And please thank everyone for the work that they're doing. It's so important to us all.
That's very kind of you to say, and I appreciate the time with you. And it's always such a pleasure to talk about music and art and culture and business with you. It really is. Thank you.
You're one of my favorite mentors, Arvind. Thank you so much.
Thanks.